Hello everyone, my name is Dmitry Novikov and I'm going to discuss about the necessity of providing a balanced budget. In my presentation, we will consider a budget structure which includes government spending and revenue, reasons for and against it. Also, we will consider solutions of how to achieve a balanced budget, 3-to-1 style, conclusion, and references. The government is responsible for distributing budget on the country. It is determined of how well people will live. So it is a hot topic which affects all of us. There are a lot of claims provided by famous economists and businessmen, such as William Vickery or Gary Johnson, who advocates for or against a balanced budget. Hence, let's figure it out. Is government should provide a balanced budget or not? To begin with, it is necessary to understand what balanced budget means. The term refers to a budget in which revenue and expenditures are equal. As a result, there is neither a deficit nor a surplus in the budget. Let's figure out of what government budget consists of. The federal budget of the United States is divided into three sections: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and interest on debt. According to Congressional Budget Office, annual appropriation acts, which are overseen by the House and Senate appropriation committees, provide authority for discretionary spending. Most defense, education, and transportation initiatives, as well as the range of other federal programs and activities, are supported this manner. Those funds are subject to a different set of budget enforcement rules and procedures than those that apply to required spending. CBO tells the budget authority that appropriation acts would offer and estimates that outlays that would result while Congress examined them. Mandatory spending includes the nation's three main entitlement programs: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, as well as many smaller programs: unemployment compensation, federal employee retirement schemes, student loans, and deposit insurance. Several required expenditure programs, such as Social Security, remain in force indefinitely, while others, such as some agriculture programs, expire after a set length of time. Other than the government's net interest payment, around 60% of federal spending in 2012 was required. Because no more legislative action is required for the change in expenditure to take effect, legislation that changed direct spending would influence the budget deficit on its own. Spending for entitlement programs and certain other payments to persons, corporations, and state and local governments are included in mandatory or direct spending. Mandatory spending is usually determined by legislative requirements rather than annual appropriation bills. As an example, let's look at the figure which represents composition of federal spending in 2019. It directly shows the relationship between government spending. We see that the most important is mandatory, as it has 60%. Next, discretionary. It has 30%. And 8% has interest on debt. What about government revenue? It generally accumulates income by collecting taxes. First is individual income, also known as personal income tax. Is a tax that is collected on a person's wages, salaries, dividend, interest, and other earnings throughout the year. Second, social insurance tax pays for the old age, survivors, and disability insurance program, which provides for the retirement, disability, and survivorship benefits that millions of Americans get each year. Third is corporate income tax, which levied directly on the profits or capital of businesses or similar legal bodies. Then excise tax. It is any duties imposed on produced items at the time of manufacturing rather than at the time of a sale. As an example, let's look at the figure which represents sources of federal revenue in 29. We see that the most profitable tax is individual income tax with 50%. Then, social insurance tax with 36%. Next, corporate income tax with 7%. And excise tax with just 3%. I believe that government should provide a balanced budget. According to Savage, it's said that the public wants a budget that is balanced. Moreover, the United States adopted the Balanced Budget Amendment. It is a constitutional regulation stating that the state spending cannot exceed its revenue. It necessitates a balance between the government's planned receipts and expenditures. Let's consider reasons for it. A balanced budget will allow the government to avoid the harmful effects of expanding federal debt, which can lead to financial crisis, default, or higher inflation. Moreover, growing federal debt can be considered at Congress' fault, so it cannot keep deficit. So the amendment will constrain the hands of future Congresses, as its ability to tax and spend money, which is derived directly from the United States Constitution. However, there are several drawbacks of balanced budget. According to the staff, it is difficult to maintain a balanced budget. Rather of working with concrete numbers, the amendment most likely need to work with budget forecast, as it's impossible to predict exact budget in coming year. Hence, relying on forecasts may make feeding with them irresistible. Next, there is no indication that a debt spiral is on the horizon. Countries that issue debts in their own currency, such as the United States, have a lot of leeway with creditors. Consider how the United Kingdom, the United States, and Japan compare to China. Despite their higher debt levels, the three countries that issue debts in their own currencies have substantially lower interest rates. This indicates that the federal debt's burden isn't significant enough to cause a financial disaster. Balanced budget may be excessive. This is because surpluses aren't required to put debt on a more sustainable path. What matters is the debt level as a percentage of the whole economy, not the total debt level. To keep that number from rising, all that is required is for debt to expand at a slower rate than GDP. In order to achieve a balanced budget, it is necessary to follow the rules, which called balanced budget requirements. They are constitutional or legislative provisions that prevent states from spending more money than they bring in. Actually, some rules differ from state to state, but in general, and strong balanced budget requirements should follow one or more norms. Mandates the government to sign a balanced budget, forbids states from rolling over deficit into the next year, and requires the legislature to enact a balanced budget, accompanied by within-year fiscal constraints. The results after following those requirements will be less debt, smaller deficit, lower borrowing cost, reduced spending, and etc. 3-to-1 style. I learned what is balanced budget, government spending, and consequences of rising of federal debt. I would apply in real life a balanced budget and its requirements because it will be useful for the economy. One thing I would explore deeper is federal debt, as I consider it interesting. Conclusion. Thus, there are convincing arguments for and against that should government balance its budget. It will be difficult to maintain as it's impossible to have exact numbers of the upcoming years. But in general, balanced budget will help the economy to fight against negative consequences of the federal debt and help to fight with deficit. So this is my references. Thank you for the attention.